Hello everyone, welcome to SleepSpace. Tonight we will talk about one of the deepest questions humanity has ever asked. Does consciousness create reality, or does it simply observe it? For centuries, philosophers, scientists, and spiritual traditions have wrestled with this puzzle. At first glance, the world feels straightforward. We open our eyes, and there it is, solid, external, independent of us. But when we start to look more carefully, especially through the lens of physics, neuroscience, and philosophy, that seemingly simple picture begins to unravel. The line between what is out there and what is happening in here becomes blurred. Is reality something fixed, existing whether or not we are aware of it? Or does our act of perceiving, thinking, and being aware actually bring it into existence in some way? To begin, let's step into the world of quantum physics, because this is often where the conversation starts. In the quantum realm, particles don't seem to exist in definite states until they are measured. Instead, they exist in a superposition, a cloud of probabilities. When an observation is made, the wave of possibilities collapses into a definite outcome. For example, in the famous double-slit experiment, light behaves like both a particle and a wave. But when it is observed, it chooses one behavior. This strange effect has made some wonder. Is consciousness itself responsible for collapsing the wave function? Does our awareness literally pull reality out of uncertainty into solid form? Or is it just the act of measurement without requiring conscious awareness that does the job? Physicists still debate this fiercely. If we consider this possibility, it raises profound implications. If consciousness plays a fundamental role in shaping reality at the smallest scales, perhaps what we experience as the physical world is not entirely independent of our awareness. In this view, consciousness is not just a passive witness, it is an active participant, woven into the fabric of existence. But not all scientists agree. Some argue that consciousness isn't necessary, that the collapse of probability into certainty can be explained by interactions with the environment or with instruments, even if no one is there to watch. From this perspective, reality exists whether we are aware of it or not, and our consciousness is more like a light bulb shining on a room that was already there. But let's step back from physics for a moment and think about how we experience reality in everyday life. Everything you know, every sound you hear, every color you see, every thought you think, these are all happening in your mind. You don't directly experience the external world. Instead, your brain constructs a model of it using signals from your senses. When you see a tree, what is actually happening is that light reflects off the tree, enters your eyes, and is processed by your brain. Neurons fire, electrical signals cascade, and suddenly the image of a tree appears in your consciousness. That tree as you experience it, green leaves, brown trunk, a sense of height and solidity, exists only in your awareness. The real tree is a pattern of atoms and energy, which themselves are mostly empty space. The tree you know is already a creation of consciousness. This leads us to a fascinating paradox. Even if there is an objective reality outside of us, we never access it directly. Everything we experience is filtered, interpreted, and constructed by our minds. So in some sense, consciousness does create the reality we live in. Not necessarily the physical stuff out there, but the reality we actually know. The lived world of colors, sounds, emotions, and meaning. Without consciousness, the universe may exist, but it would be a silent, colorless, tasteless void without anyone to perceive it. In that sense, consciousness breathes reality into existence. Philosophers have long debated this. Idealists, such as George Berkeley, argued that reality exists only in the mind, that to be is to be perceived. Materialists, on the other hand, claim that matter is primary and consciousness is just a byproduct of physical processes. Between these poles lies a spectrum of views. Some suggest a middle path. Perhaps reality has an objective existence, but consciousness plays a role in shaping how that reality manifests. Others, drawing from Eastern traditions, see consciousness not as something that arises from the brain, but as the fundamental ground of being, with the physical world emerging from it like waves from the ocean. When we consider neuroscience, we find another layer of complexity. The brain is a prediction machine. It doesn't passively record the world, it actively constructs it. Studies show that what we perceive is often a mixture of incoming sensory information and predictions generated by the brain. For example, when you look around a familiar room, your brain fills in details that aren't directly in your line of sight. When you hear someone speak in a noisy environment, your mind reconstructs words that may have been partially obscured. In this way, the brain is constantly creating a version of reality based on its best guesses. Consciousness then experiences this constructed world as if it were solid and real. But does this mean that reality itself is created by consciousness? Or is consciousness merely creating a personal simulation of a reality that already exists? This is where the question deepens. If all you ever know is the simulation generated by your mind, can you truly say what lies beyond it? Some thinkers argue that since we can never step outside our consciousness to check, the distinction between reality as it is and reality as we perceive it may not even make sense. For us, perception is reality. Let's bring in a thought experiment. Imagine a world where no conscious beings exist, no humans, no animals, no awareness at all. The planets would still orbit, stars would still burn, molecules would still move. But without a conscious observer, would any of that exist in the way we understand existence? There would be no colour, because colour is the brain's interpretation of light frequencies. There would be no sound, because sound is the conscious experience of air vibrations. There would be no meaning, because meaning arises only in minds. The universe would be there, but silent and blank, waiting for consciousness to light it up. On the other hand, consider the possibility that consciousness is not just a local phenomenon inside brains, but a fundamental aspect of reality itself. Some theories, such as Panpsychism, suggest that consciousness is woven into the very fabric of the universe, present in all matter to some degree. In this view, the universe doesn't merely exist independent of awareness. It is awareness expressing itself in infinite forms. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it is reality discovering itself. What makes this question so captivating is that both perspectives hold weight. From the scientific standpoint, the world behaves as if it exists independently, following laws and patterns whether we observe it or not. Yet from the subjective standpoint, all we ever know is the world within our consciousness. The truth may be that consciousness both observes and creates, depending on how we define reality. It creates the experienced world of perception, meaning, and inner life. And it observes a universe that may or may not exist beyond the veil of awareness. As we move deeper into this exploration, we'll continue to pull at this thread, examining whether consciousness is a passive witness to a pre-existing universe, or the very force bringing reality into being. Either way, the mystery remains profound. Without consciousness, what would reality be? And with it, could it be that the universe is not merely something we inhabit, but something we are co-creating every moment we are aware? One of the most striking things about human consciousness is how much it depends on interpretation. The raw data reaching our senses is incomplete, fragmented, and often ambiguous. yet the world we experience feels continuous, vivid, and meaningful. How does this happen? The brain takes scattered information and weaves it into a coherent narrative. This narrative feels solid and external, but in truth, it is a construction within consciousness itself. Think about vision for a moment. At any given time, your eyes only capture a small slice of the visual field in sharp detail. The rest is blurry, filled in by your brain. You don't notice the gaps because consciousness stitches everything together seamlessly. Even your blind spot, the area where the optic nerve exits the eye and no light is detected, goes completely unnoticed in daily life. Your brain simply invents what should be there. This means that even something as seemingly direct as seeing reality is actually the brain generating an internal model. In this sense, what we call reality is already an act of creation, but perception goes beyond just filling in gaps. Experiments in psychology show that what we expect to see or hear profoundly shapes what we actually perceive. For example, if you are told that a certain sound is a word, your brain will often interpret it that way, even if the actual noise is ambiguous. In one famous experiment, people were shown the same visual stimulus, but depending on the context, their brains interpreted it as either the letter B or the number 13. This reveals that consciousness doesn't passively record reality. It actively interprets, organizes, and sometimes even reshapes it. If perception is this creative, then what does that mean for the question of whether consciousness creates reality? At the very least, it shows that the reality we live in, the one filled with colours, patterns, objects, and meanings, is not the raw world itself, but a version sculpted by awareness. And this raises a profound idea. Perhaps the very act of observing shapes the observed, not only in the quantum sense, but in the psychological and experiential sense as well. Now let's step into the realm of time. Time feels like one of the most solid features of reality, flowing steadily from past to future. Yet modern physics suggests that time may not be as straightforward as it seems. Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time is not absolute. It can stretch or compress depending on speed and gravity. To some physicists, this suggests that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously in a block universe. If that is the case, then our conscious experience of time flowing moment by moment may not be a property of the universe itself, but of our awareness moving through it. Consciousness could be the projector, turning the static film reel of space-time into a moving story. This idea that reality in its raw form might be timeless, shapeless, and indeterminate, and that consciousness is what organizes it into a flowing, meaningful experience, aligns with many philosophical traditions. Some ancient Indian philosophies describe the world as Maya, an illusion or a projection created by consciousness. Not illusion in the sense of being false, but in the sense of being a constructed appearance, like a dream. The dream feels real while you are in it, but when you wake, you realize it was a creation of the mind. Could our waking life be something similar, only on a larger scale? Let's pause and think of dreams. When you dream at night, your consciousness creates entire worlds. You see landscapes, interact with people, and feel emotions. Everything appears external, yet it is all generated within your mind. When you wake, you realize that the mountains, the cities, the conversations, none of them existed out there. They were internal creations experienced as external reality. If consciousness can do this so convincingly in dreams, what does that say about waking reality? Could it be that the line between dreaming and waking is thinner than we imagine, with both being experiences arising in consciousness? Of course, dreams differ from waking life in that waking reality has a certain stability. When you put an object on the table, it remains there even when you leave the room. When multiple people look at it, they all agree it exists. This intersubjective consistency suggests that there is something beyond individual minds holding reality together. Yet the fact remains, your personal experience of that object is entirely internal. You don't have direct access to the object itself, only to the version your consciousness presents. Reality, then, could be thought of as a collaboration, an external world structured by laws of physics, combined with a conscious mind that gives it shape, meaning, and experience. Another way to look at this is through the concept of the observer effect in daily life. When you pay attention to something, it seems to change. A sound in the background you were ignoring suddenly becomes loud when you focus on it. A thought you barely noticed grows powerful when you dwell on it. Even at the social level, observation changes behavior. People act differently when they know they are being watched. This suggests that the act of observing, whether physically or psychologically, is never neutral. Consciousness has an active role, shaping not just your internal experience, but sometimes the external unfolding of events. Philosophy also offers us a fascinating perspective in phenomenology, which studies how things appear to consciousness. According to this approach, the world we know is inseparable from the way it appears in our awareness. The tree you see is not just an arrangement of atoms, it is the tree as it appears to you, with colour, texture, meaning, and context. The tree in itself, independent of consciousness, is unknowable. This doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It simply means that the only reality we can ever access is the one appearing in awareness. From this angle, consciousness is not just a window onto reality, it is the stage on which reality appears. Now let's connect this back to quantum physics for a moment. When we consider the measurement problem, the fact that particles exist in many states until observed, it resonates with this idea. At the deepest levels of nature, reality may exist as probabilities, potentialities, or information. Consciousness then experiences a version of that reality, turning possibility into actuality. Even if it isn't consciousness itself collapsing the wave function, it is still consciousness that experiences the outcome. Without awareness, what would those probabilities or outcomes even mean? All of this brings us to an important distinction. There are two kinds of reality we might be talking about. First, there is objective reality, the world that exists independent of us, with its galaxies, atoms, and physical laws. Second, there is experiential reality, the world as it appears to consciousness, full of sights, sounds, thoughts, and feelings. While science focuses on the first, our actual lives are lived entirely in the second. And in the second, consciousness is undeniably the creator. The colours you see don't exist in wavelengths of light. They exist only in the mind interpreting those wavelengths. The sounds you hear don't exist in vibrating air molecules. They exist when consciousness translates vibrations into tones and words. The entire rich tapestry of life is woven by awareness. This leads us to a daring question. Could it be that the so-called objective reality is itself dependent on consciousness in some way? Or is it enough to say that consciousness creates the reality we experience, while something beyond us exists independently? The mystery is that we can never fully step outside awareness to check. Consciousness is both the tool and the medium. Whatever reality is, it is always filtered through the lens of mind. The more we reflect on this, the more it becomes clear that the question of whether consciousness creates or observes is not one with a simple yes or no answer. It may be both. It may create the reality we experience, while simultaneously observing of reality beyond our direct grasp. And perhaps the interplay between these two levels is the very heart of existence itself. Science is often described as the most objective pursuit we have, a way to uncover the truths of the universe, independent of bias. Yet even science cannot escape the fact that all knowledge, all observation, and all discovery takes place within consciousness. Instruments record data, but until that data is perceived, interpreted, and understood by a conscious mind, it is not knowledge. This means that consciousness is not merely a participant in shaping personal reality. It is the foundation of everything we claim to know about reality at all. Think about mathematics, often regarded as the most abstract and universal of sciences. Numbers, equations, and geometric patterns feel timeless, existing beyond individual minds. Yet to engage with mathematics, you must bring it into awareness. A mathematical truth may be said to exist independently, but it only comes alive through the conscious act of understanding. A formula written in a textbook is nothing more than ink on a page until a conscious mind interprets it. This reveals a subtle truth. Knowledge is never separate from consciousness. The universe may hold endless patterns and laws, but they are silent until observed, thought about, and integrated into awareness. Now consider art, music, and culture. These are deeply tied to consciousness as a creative force. A painting on a canvas is just pigment and texture without a mind to see it. Music is nothing but vibrations of air without a mind to hear and interpret it. Meaning, emotion and beauty exist only in consciousness. This illustrates that reality is not simply what exists out there. Reality, as lived, is a merging of the external world with the inner experience of awareness. Consciousness does not merely observe, it adds layers of meaning and significance that transform the neutral into the profound. Let's bring in a thought experiment from philosophy called the brain in a vat. Imagine that your brain was removed from your body and placed in a container, kept alive by machines, and fed electrical signals identical to those it would receive if it were still in a body. If you were experiencing those signals, you would still see, hear, and feel a world. From your perspective, nothing would seem different. But in that case, what would reality be? Is it the physical world outside the vat, or the conscious experience inside it? This raises the unsettling possibility that everything we call reality might be a kind of projection created by consciousness interpreting signals. Even without such extreme scenarios, we already know that the brain is capable of creating vivid realities independent of external input. Hallucinations, for example, can generate sights and sounds as real as those caused by external stimuli. People under the influence of certain substances report entire worlds of experience, landscapes of colour and sound that feel tangible, though they exist entirely within awareness. This capacity for consciousness to generate reality internally challenges the notion that it only observes. It shows that the line between creation and observation is not so clear-cut. Now let's examine memory. Memory is not a perfect recording of the past, but a reconstruction created in the present moment. When you recall an event, your brain doesn't simply replay a stored file, it rebuilds the experience, filling in gaps with assumptions and associations. In doing so, your consciousness recreates the past as a living reality in your mind. This means that even your personal history, the narrative of who you are, is partly created by consciousness. The past is not simply observed, it is continuously remade. Similarly, when you imagine the future, you are constructing possible realities that do not yet exist. You picture outcomes, scenarios, and possibilities, and in your awareness, they become temporarily real. The mind moves through time not as a passive spectator, but as an active creator, weaving stories of what might be. These imagined realities influence your decisions, shape your emotions, and alter the trajectory of your life. Once again, we see that consciousness does more than observe. It constructs, projects, and shapes. But here we must ask, if consciousness is capable of generating reality internally, how do we distinguish between what is real and what is imagined? The answer often lies in coherence and agreement. Waking reality has the quality of persistence. It is shared across multiple observers. If I set an object on the table, you and I can both see it, and it will still be there tomorrow. Imagined realities, on the other hand, vanish when attention shifts, and they are not consistently shared. This intersubjective stability suggests that there is an external structure to reality beyond consciousness. Yet even here, it is consciousness that registers the stability, creates meaning from it, and recognizes it as real. Without awareness, that stability would not be noticed at all. Let's dive deeper into the notion of consensus reality. This is the shared reality that groups of people agree upon. It includes not only physical objects, but also social constructs: money, governments, languages, laws. These things exist because collective consciousness creates and sustains them. A paper bill has no intrinsic value. It becomes money only because minds agree that it does. A nation exists because millions of people share the belief in its boundaries and rules. Remove the conscious agreement, and these things dissolve. This is another way in which consciousness creates reality, not just individually, but collectively. At the same time, consciousness is shaped by reality. The external world provides constraints and structures that influence what is possible in awareness. You cannot simply will the laws of gravity away, nor can you imagine a reality so powerfully that it overrides the sun rising each morning. This interplay suggests that reality may be a kind of dialogue. Consciousness shapes it, interprets it, and adds meaning, while external conditions provide the framework within which this creation takes place. From here, we can ask, what if the external world itself is not separate from consciousness, but a manifestation of it? This idea appears in various philosophical and spiritual traditions. Some interpretations of idealism suggest that matter is a construct of mind at the most fundamental level. In this view, the universe is consciousness expressing itself as physical form. Just as a dream appears solid and external but is made of mind, perhaps the universe itself is the dream of consciousness on a cosmic scale. Science does not endorse this view directly, yet some physicists and philosophers find it difficult to rule out. When we probe the foundations of matter, we find not solid substance, but patterns of energy, information, and probability. The solidity of the world dissolves the closer we look. At the most basic level, reality appears abstract and immaterial, something that could be compatible with the idea of consciousness as the foundation. This doesn't prove that consciousness creates reality, but it leaves the door open to the possibility. The question then becomes, are we conscious beings within a universe of matter, or is matter itself a pattern within a vast field of consciousness? The first view sees awareness as a latecomer, emerging only after billions of years of evolution. The second sees awareness as the ground from which all arises, including the physical cosmos. Both views are difficult to prove, and both have profound implications. If consciousness is a product of matter, then our awareness is a temporary flicker in a vast, indifferent universe. If matter is a product of consciousness, then awareness is eternal, and the universe itself may be more like a thought than a machine. Either way, one thing is certain: consciousness is central. Without it, reality as we know it would not exist, for there would be no experience, no knowledge, no meaning. Whether it creates reality or merely illuminates it, consciousness is the stage upon which the entire play of existence unfolds. As we continue unraveling this question, it's worth asking why consciousness even exists in the first place. From a purely materialist standpoint, the universe could have unfolded with stars, planets, and matter interacting according to physical laws, without any need for awareness. Yet here we are, not only aware, but asking about our own awareness. Why would the universe evolve beings capable of not just surviving, but contemplating existence itself? This very fact suggests that consciousness may be more than an accidental byproduct. One perspective is that consciousness evolved as a survival tool. By being aware, organisms could better adapt to their environments, make decisions, and plan for the future. This evolutionary view explains some aspects of awareness, but it doesn't fully account for the richness of subjective experience. For example, why should the firing of neurons produce the sensation of colour, the feeling of music, or the depth of emotion? These experiences, known as qualia, are deeply personal and cannot be reduced to physical processes alone. This is often called the hard problem of consciousness. Why does matter, when arranged in certain ways, produce an inner life at all? The hard problem raises another possibility. Maybe consciousness is not something produced by the brain, but something fundamental to the universe itself. If awareness is woven into the fabric of reality, then the brain may function more like a receiver or filter, shaping a broader field of consciousness into the individual perspective we call self. This idea aligns with theories such as Panpsychism, which propose that consciousness is present, in some form, throughout all of existence. If so, then the universe may not simply be observed by awareness. It may be awareness unfolding as the universe. Let's take a closer look at perception through this lens. Imagine light waves bouncing off an object. They strike the retina, causing electrical signals that travel to the brain. There, complex networks of neurons process the information, until finally, the experience of sight arises. At no point in this chain is colour present. Light waves have no colour, they are just frequencies. The eye and brain have no colour, they are just biological mechanisms. Yet in consciousness, vivid colours appear. This gap between physical process and conscious experience suggests that awareness is adding something beyond observation. It is not just recording what is out there. It is generating a world of experience that feels rich and real. The same is true for sound. Vibrations in the air are not sound, they are pressure waves. The ear translates them into signals, but only in awareness do they become the music of a song, the laughter of a friend, or the whisper of wind through trees. Without consciousness, there would be no sound, no colour, no texture, only a silent, motionless universe of interactions. This raises a powerful thought. Maybe what we call reality is incomplete without awareness. It is not just that consciousness observes reality, it completes it. Philosophers throughout history have grappled with this idea. Immanuel Kant, for instance, argued that we never know the world as it is in itself, only as it appears through the structures of our mind. Space, time, and causality may not exist independently. They may be the way consciousness organizes reality. If that is true, then what we call reality is inseparable from awareness. The universe we know is always a co-creation between the external and the internal. Consider also the role of imagination. Consciousness does not limit itself to interpreting sensory input. It can construct entirely new realities. When you imagine a scene, you are not simply observing something external. you are creating it internally. This power of imagination shapes art, science, and even the future. Every invention, every discovery, every cultural transformation begins as a vision in consciousness before it becomes reality. In this sense, consciousness is not merely passive, it is the engine of change. Let's take an example from history. The idea of flight existed in the imagination long before it became technological reality. For centuries, humans dreamed of soaring through the sky like birds. These dreams lived in consciousness as myths, stories, and drawings. Eventually, those imagined realities inspired experiments, designs, and ultimately the invention of airplanes. What began as a creation of mind became a physical reality. This illustrates how consciousness can shape the external world, not only in the sense of perception, but in the sense of directing the course of history. The same principle applies on a personal level. Your goals, desires, and beliefs are products of consciousness, yet they guide your actions, which in turn shape your reality. If you believe something is possible, you are more likely to pursue it, and your actions can bring it into being. If you believe something is impossible, you may not attempt it, and thus it never becomes real for you. Consciousness does not simply observe your life, it actively creates its trajectory. This interplay between inner and outer reality raises another question: is there any limit to what consciousness can create? On one hand, we are bound by physical laws. No matter how vividly you imagine flying unaided, gravity will not allow it. On the other hand, history shows that what once seemed impossible often becomes reality. Electricity, space travel, instant communication across the globe, all were once inconceivable. Does this suggest that consciousness, in partnership with the external world, can gradually expand what is possible? Perhaps reality is not fixed but evolving, with consciousness as one of the forces driving that evolution. This brings us to the idea of participatory reality. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, such as John Wheeler's participatory universe, suggest that observers are not separate from the cosmos, but integral to it. According to this view, the universe is not a completed structure waiting to be observed. It is unfinished, unfolding in relationship with conscious observers. Every act of observation contributes to shaping what reality becomes. In this framework, consciousness is not just a witness, but a co-creator of the cosmos itself. What is striking about this idea is that it bridges science and philosophy. Science shows us that observation changes what is measured. Philosophy reminds us that all experience arises within awareness. Together, they suggest a universe where consciousness is not a late arrival, but a central feature. Whether or not consciousness creates reality in a literal physical sense, it undoubtedly creates the reality we live in. And in doing so, it may be participating in something larger than we can yet imagine, a cosmic dialogue between awareness and existence. What is the nature of the self? Because when we speak of consciousness, we usually mean the awareness each of us feels from the inside, the I that experiences. If this I is central to reality, then understanding its nature is essential. Let us begin with the illusion of separateness. Neuroscience shows that the sense of self is not a single, fixed thing, but a construction. Different brain regions contribute to creating a unified sense of me. Yet when studied closely, the self seems less like a solid entity and more like a story, continually updated and retold. If the self is a narrative generated by consciousness, then who exactly is observing or creating reality? Is it this personal story, or is it something deeper, the awareness that witnesses the story itself? Many philosophical and spiritual traditions point to this deeper awareness. They suggest that beneath the shifting thoughts, emotions, and self-narratives lies pure consciousness, the capacity to be aware, independent of what is being observed. If this is true, then the personal self is not the creator of reality, but rather a character within it. The real mystery lies in the impersonal awareness that allows any experience to exist at all. Now let's explore how this awareness interacts with the external world. Consider the act of attention. Wherever consciousness directs its focus, reality becomes more vivid. A flower at the edge of your vision is just part of the scenery, until you focus on it. Suddenly, details emerge: the curve of petals, the shades of color, the texture of the stem. By directing awareness, you enrich the world. In this sense, attention is like a spotlight, illuminating certain aspects of reality while leaving others in shadow. Does this act of selective illumination count as creating reality, or simply refining the observation of it? Perhaps both. Attention doesn't just change perception, it changes the brain itself. Neuroscience has shown that what we focus on shapes neural pathways. This phenomenon, called neuroplasticity, means that consciousness literally reshapes the structure of the brain over time. Musicians who practice daily develop regions of the brain more finely tuned to sound. Athletes strengthen neural connections related to movement. Even meditators can change areas linked to attention and emotion. Consciousness, through focus, alters the physical matter of the body. Here again, we see that awareness is not passive. It is an active force shaping the very structure of what we call reality. This interplay of focus and change extends beyond the brain. Consider the placebo effect. When someone believes a treatment will help them, their body often responds as if the treatment were real. Pain decreases, symptoms lessen, healing occurs. Consciousness, in the form of belief and expectation, creates measurable changes in physical reality. Even though the mechanism is not fully understood, the evidence is undeniable. What we believe influences what happens in our bodies. Here, consciousness is not only observing, but participating in shaping outcomes. The same principle applies to stress and emotion. When the mind perceives danger, whether real or imagined, the body responds with hormones, increased heart rate, and heightened alertness. Prolonged states of worry can lead to illness, while states of calm and optimism can promote health. Consciousness alters physiology, proving once more that it does more than observe. Let's step into another domain: culture and collective consciousness. Shared beliefs, values, and stories shape civilizations. Money, for instance, is only paper or digital numbers until consciousness agrees on its value. Laws and institutions exist only because people collectively uphold them. Art, science, religion, and technology all begin as ideas in consciousness, later becoming structures that transform the world. In this sense, human history is a record of consciousness shaping reality on a grand scale. But does this mean consciousness is creating the universe itself, or simply shaping aspects within it? To answer, let's consider an analogy. Imagine a painter and a canvas. The canvas is the external world, providing a surface and boundaries. The painter is consciousness, applying color, form, and meaning. Without the canvas, there is nothing to paint upon. Without the painter, the canvas remains blank. Together, they create the painting we call reality. The question then is whether the canvas exists independently, or whether it too is the product of consciousness. If the canvas itself is woven from awareness, then consciousness is not only the painter, but also the material of the painting. Physics gives us hints that the canvas may be stranger than we think. At the smallest scales, particles are not solid objects, but clouds of probability. Space and time themselves may not be fundamental but emergent from deeper structures. Some scientists even propose that reality is more like information than matter. If information is the foundation, then consciousness, which interprets and gives meaning to information, may be inseparable from the fabric of existence. In such a framework, the distinction between creating and observing might dissolve entirely. Let us return to the individual for a moment. Think of how memory and imagination shape daily life. When you recall a happy moment, you re-experience it in consciousness, complete with emotion. When you imagine a fearful future, your body responds as if it were real. In these moments, awareness creates realities that feel as tangible as external events. These internal realities influence your decisions, which ripple outward, shaping external reality in turn. Consciousness becomes both architect and observer, constantly weaving the threads of experience into the larger tapestry of life. Another fascinating aspect is the role of dreams. In dreams, consciousness generates entire environments, characters, and narratives without external input. These dream worlds are convincing, often indistinguishable from waking life while they unfold. When you wake, you recognize them as creations of mind. Yet in the dream, they were your reality. If consciousness can generate such convincing realities while asleep, could waking reality also be a more elaborate version of this creative process? Perhaps waking and dreaming are not opposites, but points on a spectrum of awareness creating experience. Some thinkers suggest that reality itself may be dreamlike, a projection of consciousness at a universal level. If so, then we are both dreamers and characters in the dream. This idea resonates with certain Eastern philosophies which describe life as Lila, a divine play of consciousness. In this view, the universe is not a fixed machine, but a dynamic unfolding of awareness expressing itself. Of course, this perspective is not without its challenges. If consciousness creates reality, why is it that we cannot instantly will anything into existence? Why can't we imagine a mountain into being, or dissolve gravity with thought? One answer is that reality operates through shared laws and constraints, providing stability and coherence. Consciousness may be a creative force, but it expresses itself within patterns that maintain order. Just as a dream has its own logic, waking reality has rules that shape how creation unfolds. These rules may themselves be expressions of consciousness at a deeper level, ensuring that the shared dream remains consistent. Ultimately, whether consciousness is creating reality or simply illuminating it, we cannot escape the fact that awareness is the gateway to everything. Without it, there is no experience, no meaning, no knowledge. The universe may exist, but without consciousness, it is invisible and silent. With consciousness, it becomes alive, rich, and full of possibility. The question of creation versus observation may not have a single answer. Instead, it may reveal a deeper truth, that consciousness and reality are inseparable, two aspects of one mystery that cannot be fully divided. Consider the senses. Human eyes detect only a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, roughly between infrared and ultraviolet. Beyond this slice, there are vast ranges of light invisible to us. Radio waves, X-rays, gamma rays. These exist regardless of our perception, yet for us, they are hidden unless translated by technology. Consciousness constructs reality out of limited data, filling in gaps and presenting a coherent world. In this sense, what we call reality is already an edited version, shaped by awareness. The same is true of sound. Human hearing is restricted to certain frequencies, leaving ultrasonic and infrasonic vibrations outside conscious awareness. Yet animals such as bats or whales navigate worlds rich with these sounds. Each creature's consciousness constructs a unique version of reality based on its senses. Which version is true? Perhaps none. Or perhaps all are fragments of a greater reality that no single consciousness can encompass fully. This brings us to the idea that consciousness doesn't just passively receive the world, it interprets, organizes, and even generates the experience of it. Neuroscientists have shown that the brain does not simply record sensory input like a camera. Instead, it actively predicts and fills in details. When you look at a pattern of lines and dots, your mind might instantly see a face, even though no face is present. This phenomenon, called pareidolia, illustrates how the brain creates meaning that wasn't objectively there. Consciousness generates experience from raw input, and sometimes it invents patterns out of nothing. Memory provides another example. Every time you recall an event, your brain reconstructs it. Memories are not perfect recordings, but flexible reconstructions, influenced by current beliefs and emotions. Consciousness continually reshapes the past, altering the personal reality you live with. If memories are unstable creations, then the reality of your own life story is not fixed, but fluid, woven anew each time you bring it into awareness. Now consider imagination. The human mind can conjure worlds that have never existed, complete with laws of physics, landscapes, and characters. Writers and artists pull entire realities from the well of imagination, and these imagined worlds often influence the external world. Think of how science fiction has inspired technological advancements, or how cultural myths guide societies. Imagination is not a passive reflection, it is a creative engine. Consciousness projects possible realities into existence, some of which later become actual. This raises the question, is external reality fundamentally separate from these inner creations, or are both part of the same process? If imagination and perception both arise from consciousness, then perhaps the boundary between them is not as rigid as we think. One brings forth inner worlds, the other shapes the experience of the outer world. Both are acts of creation in their own ways. Let us shift to quantum physics, where the boundaries between creation and observation blur even more. In the double-slit experiment, particles behave as waves until measured, at which point they collapse into definite outcomes. Observation seems to play a role in determining physical reality. Yet physicists debate what observation truly means. Does it require a conscious mind, or is any interaction with the environment enough? If consciousness is essential for collapse, then awareness is woven directly into the fabric of physical reality. If not, then the role of consciousness may be to translate probability into experience, not to create particles themselves. Still, some interpretations, such as the participatory anthropic principle, suggest that observers are necessary for the universe to exist in its present form. Without consciousness, there might be no defined universe at all, only potential. If this is true, then reality is not fully real until awareness engages with it. Consciousness doesn't just look at the world, it brings the world into being. We can also think about the role of collective observation. Science advances through measurement, replication, and consensus. When many minds observe the same phenomenon, it stabilizes into accepted reality. Yet history shows that paradigms shift. The Earth was once thought to be the center of the universe. Illness was once explained by spirits or humors. Collective consciousness creates shared frameworks, but these frameworks change. What we accept as reality is shaped by the evolving consciousness of humanity. Technology amplifies this creative power. Virtual reality, for example, allows consciousness to enter environments that feel as real as the physical world. While these spaces are digital constructs, the experiences within them are genuine to the mind. The emotions, memories, and decisions shaped by virtual environments carry over into waking life. Here we see consciousness actively shaping parallel realities, demonstrating that the boundaries of the real are more flexible than they appear. Another perspective comes from philosophy. The idealist tradition argues that consciousness is primary and matter is secondary. According to this view, the physical world is a manifestation of mind, not the other way around. Bishop Berkeley, a prominent idealist, suggested that objects exist only insofar as they are perceived. While modern science does not fully embrace this view, the mystery of observation in quantum mechanics leaves the door open to reconsidering it. If consciousness is fundamental, then what we perceive as matter may be expressions of awareness structured in consistent patterns. From another angle, materialism asserts that consciousness emerges from physical processes in the brain. In this framework, reality exists independently, and awareness is a latecomer, evolved to help organisms survive. Here, consciousness does not create reality, but interprets it. Yet even within this view, consciousness adds meaning. A mountain may exist whether or not anyone observes it, but the experience of the mountain, the awe, the beauty, the symbolism, arises only through awareness. Reality may exist on its own, but it becomes alive only when illuminated by consciousness. This tension between materialism and idealism mirrors the central question we are exploring. Is the world outside of us primary, with consciousness as a byproduct? Or is consciousness the ground of being, with the world as its expression? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. Consciousness may not create matter itself, but it creates the experience of matter. And since experience is all we ever truly know, it is fair to say that consciousness shapes reality in the most essential way. Let us not forget the emotional dimension. Joy, sorrow, wonder, and fear all arise in consciousness and colour reality with meaning. Without them, the world would be a neutral arrangement of atoms. With them, reality becomes a story, a drama, a journey. Consciousness not only observes, but weaves narrative, significance, and value into the universe. In doing so, it transforms existence from bare fact into lived reality. Time is one of the most fundamental aspects of our experience, yet science reveals that it may not flow the way we perceive it. In physics, past, present, and future can be seen as part of a single block, with all events existing simultaneously. Consciousness, however, experiences time as a flowing sequence, one moment giving rise to the next. If the universe is timeless at its foundation, then it is consciousness that generates the illusion of movement, creating the experience of past and future. In this sense, consciousness is not just observing, but actively constructing one of the most essential dimensions of our reality. Consider memory and anticipation. The mind continuously travels backward and forward in time, revisiting the past and simulating possible futures. This ability shapes choices, actions, and culture. A society can plan for centuries ahead or preserve traditions from centuries past because consciousness projects meaning across time. Without awareness weaving continuity, time would be nothing more than scattered events without narrative. Consciousness, then, creates the thread that turns disconnected moments into a living story. Dreams reveal another dimension of this relationship. In dreams, time stretches, collapses, or unfolds in ways that defy waking logic. A few minutes of sleep can contain hours of dream experience. Consciousness generates these flexible timelines, showing that the flow of time is not fixed but malleable under the influence of awareness. If the perception of time can be so easily reshaped, then what we call the reality of time may be more a construction of consciousness than an absolute fact. Now let us look at space. Just as with time, consciousness interprets and organizes spatial information. The brain constructs a three-dimensional world from flat sensory input. Your eyes capture patterns of light, but it is awareness that assembles these into depth, form, and distance. Without consciousness interpreting signals, space as we know it would not exist. This suggests that reality, at least in the way we experience it, is not out there waiting to be observed, but is co-created through the act of perception. Neuroscience reinforces this view through studies of perception. Optical illusions reveal how the brain invents aspects of reality. A drawing on paper can appear three-dimensional even though it is flat. Motion can be perceived where none exists. Colours can shift depending on context. These phenomena show that the mind is not a neutral observer, but an active participant, shaping the world we see. Consciousness constructs reality through assumptions, predictions, and interpretations. Yet reality has a stubborn quality. We may misperceive details, but we cannot simply decide that gravity will stop working or that the sun will not rise. This resistance suggests that consciousness is not the sole creator of reality, but operates within constraints. It is like an artist painting within the boundaries of a canvas. The canvas has its own properties, but the artist chooses how to bring them to life. Consciousness may not create the underlying structure, but it shapes how that structure is experienced. Another angle is the role of language. Language is a tool of consciousness that transforms raw experience into structured reality. Words carve the world into categories: tree, river, sky, love, fear. Without language, our perception would be a continuous flow of sensations. With language, it becomes segmented, organized, and shared. Entire realities are shaped by linguistic frameworks. For example, cultures with multiple words for snow perceive its variations more vividly than those with only one word. In this way, consciousness, through language, creates new layers of reality that guide perception and interaction. Culture amplifies this even further. Shared stories, myths, and scientific theories provide collective lenses through which reality is experienced. A rainbow, for example, can be seen as a meteorological phenomenon, a divine sign, or a spectrum of wavelengths depending on the cultural framework. The same physical event becomes multiple realities through the lens of consciousness. Reality is not just observed, but interpreted and enriched, multiplied by the diversity of awareness. Let us also consider the role of technology in extending consciousness. Telescopes and microscopes reveal worlds far beyond the limits of human senses. Satellites, sensors, and particle accelerators give us access to phenomena we could never perceive directly. These tools expand the reach of consciousness, allowing it to bring new layers of reality into existence. Before the telescope, the moons of Jupiter were not part of human reality. Now they are, because awareness has extended itself into the cosmos through instruments. Consciousness creates new realities by expanding the boundaries of what it can observe. Still, the mystery deepens when we ask, are we discovering what already exists, or are we participating in its unfolding? Did the moons of Jupiter exist in any meaningful sense before awareness turned toward them, or did they become real only through observation and interpretation? Science tends to say they were always there, but philosophy reminds us that without consciousness to perceive them, their existence was meaningless from the standpoint of lived reality. existence and meaning are intertwined, and consciousness is the bridge that connects them. At the same time, consciousness seems to have limitations. There are realms we may never access, such as dimensions beyond human perception or aspects of the universe forever hidden by cosmic horizons. If reality extends infinitely beyond awareness, then consciousness may be more of a window than a creator. But within the frame of that window, consciousness shapes everything. What is outside the frame may remain unknowable, yet what is inside is given form, depth, and significance by awareness. Thus, we are left with a paradox. Consciousness appears both limited and limitless. Limited in its ability to control or fully know the universe, yet limitless in its capacity to create experience, meaning, and worlds of imagination. This paradox may be the heart of the mystery. Consciousness may not generate the raw material of existence, but it creates the only version of reality that can ever be lived, the world as it is experienced. Meaning does not exist in the atoms themselves. A rock is simply a cluster of minerals until consciousness assigns it significance. It can be a weapon, a tool, a sacred object, or simply part of the landscape. The same object, unchanged in itself, can become vastly different realities depending on the awareness that encounters it. Meaning transforms the raw material of existence into lived reality, and meaning comes only from consciousness. This power extends beyond objects to events. Rain falling from the sky is, in physical terms, water droplets condensing and falling under gravity, yet in the awareness of one person, it may be an inconvenience ruining their plans. To another, it is a blessing for crops. To yet another, it is a metaphor for renewal and cleansing. The event itself does not change, but the reality of it does, shaped by the consciousness perceiving it. This suggests that while external phenomena provide a framework, the true fabric of lived reality is woven from meaning generated by awareness. Consider also the role of belief. Entire civilizations are built on shared beliefs that have no objective existence outside of consciousness. Nations, borders, laws, and currencies are powerful realities, yet they are sustained only by collective agreement. Remove the belief, and the structure dissolves. Money is only paper or numbers without the consciousness that believes in its value. The law is only words on paper unless people agree to uphold it. In this way, consciousness creates collective realities that shape the world more profoundly than many physical forces. This leads to the question, if so much of what we call reality is built on belief and meaning, how much of the world is truly independent of consciousness? Is there a reality out there beyond all awareness? Or is reality always, in some way, intertwined with the mind that perceives it? Even science, often considered the study of objective reality, is a product of consciousness interpreting observations, forming theories, and testing predictions. Science relies on conscious minds to describe and explain the world. Without that participation, the universe might exist, but would it be real in any sense that matters? Let us take another angle, emotion. Emotion is not just an internal state, it shapes the entire experience of reality. When you are joyful, the world appears brighter, more welcoming. When you are afraid, the same world becomes threatening, filled with hidden dangers. Consciousness, through emotion, alters the tone and texture of reality itself. The external conditions may remain unchanged, but the lived reality is transformed. This shows once again that awareness is not a passive witness, but a dynamic participant, colouring the universe with shades of meaning. Philosophers have long debated whether reality is constructed or discovered. The constructivist view argues that we build our experience of the world through interpretation, culture, and language. The realist view claims that the world exists independently of our perception. Both perspectives contain truth. Consciousness may not invent the physical substrate, but it invents the experience of that substrate, and in doing so, creates the only reality we ever actually encounter. Another revealing example is pain. Pain is not simply a signal from the body. It is an experience created by consciousness. Two people can experience the same injury with vastly different levels of pain, influenced by expectation, attention, and emotion. Some trained meditators can endure great physical discomfort with little suffering by altering their awareness of it. This demonstrates that consciousness can reshape even the most fundamental aspects of experience, creating alternate versions of reality from the same physical condition. Similarly, placebos and nocebos show how belief can influence outcomes. When someone believes a pill will heal them, their body often responds as though it has. When they believe a harmless substance will harm them, negative effects may occur. Consciousness, through expectation, shapes physiological reality. This power challenges the notion that awareness is simply an observer. It suggests that the mind participates directly in the unfolding of bodily and external events. Let us also explore the cosmic perspective. If the universe has existed for billions of years, long before conscious life appeared, what role does awareness play? Some would argue that reality was fully formed before consciousness arose, and awareness is merely a recent spectator. Yet others propose that consciousness is not confined to human beings, but is a fundamental feature of the cosmos. In this view, awareness has always been present in some form, perhaps woven into the very structure of reality. If so, then consciousness is not a late arrival, but a co-creator, shaping the universe from its beginning. The idea of panpsychism embodies this possibility. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is a basic property of matter, present in some degree even at the level of particles. Just as matter has mass and charge, it may also have an inner dimension of awareness. If this is true, then the universe itself is alive with consciousness at every scale. Reality would not be something created in one place and observed in another. It would be an inseparable web of awareness and form, each giving rise to the other. Alternatively, some interpretations propose that consciousness arises only under certain conditions, such as complex neural networks. If so, then consciousness is rare, fragile, and temporary. Reality would exist regardless, vast and indifferent, with consciousness emerging like a flicker of light in the darkness. In this case, awareness does not create reality, but adds a fleeting layer of experience to it. Yet even here, for the beings who are conscious, that layer is everything. It is the difference between a universe that is cold, silent, and meaningless, and one that is alive with stories, beauty, and wonder. We find ourselves standing before one of the greatest mysteries of existence. On one side, the physical world appears to be governed by laws that operate independently of our minds. Stars form, galaxies collide, and tectonic plates shift, whether or not anyone is there to notice. On the other side, every experience of these events, every sensation, thought, or interpretation depends entirely on consciousness. The paradox is that reality seems both independent of awareness and completely dependent on it. Let us explore this paradox through the lens of science and philosophy. In the materialist view, the universe is a vast machine, and consciousness is a byproduct of its processes. In this framework, awareness observes but does not create. Yet this explanation leaves unanswered the question of why subjective experience exists at all. Why should matter give rise to awareness? This is known as the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains unsolved. Without understanding how consciousness arises, it is difficult to dismiss the possibility that it plays a deeper role than observation alone. Idealism offers a different perspective, that consciousness is fundamental and matter arises within it. This flips the conventional view, suggesting that reality itself is the dream of awareness. In this model, the universe is not a machine, but a manifestation of mind. Our sense of being observers is part of a larger play in which consciousness experiences itself through countless forms. If this is true, then reality is not something outside of awareness. It is awareness, appearing as stars, planets, life, and thought. Between these extremes lie other interpretations. Neutral monism suggests that both matter and consciousness arise from a more fundamental substance. Dual aspect theory proposes that reality has both physical and mental dimensions, inseparable but distinct. In each case, consciousness is not a mere spectator, but an essential ingredient of existence. Whether it creates the world or coexists with it, it cannot be reduced to nothing more than a shadow of physical processes. Let us also consider the role of perspective. Each conscious being experiences reality in a unique way. For a bee, the ultraviolet patterns on flowers are as real as the colours humans see. For a bat, echoes form the structure of the world. Each awareness constructs its own reality, tuned to its survival and experience. The diversity of perception suggests that reality is not one fixed thing, but many overlapping versions, each shaped by the consciousness that perceives it. The question then arises, is there an ultimate reality beyond all perspectives, or is reality itself always tied to awareness? If there is a world completely independent of consciousness, we may never know it, because all knowledge passes through the filter of experience. We can infer, model, and theorize, but the raw, unmediated truth, if it exists, remains forever outside awareness. In this sense, the only reality we can ever truly know is the one shaped by consciousness. Now let us reflect on the creative capacity of the mind. Human history is filled with examples of consciousness reshaping the world. The discovery of fire, the invention of the wheel, the development of language and science, all arose from awareness imagining new possibilities. Consciousness not only observes but envisions, and through action brings visions into material form. Cities, art, technology, and even the digital world of today are extensions of imagination made real. This demonstrates that consciousness has the power to create realities that did not exist before, not only in thought but in physical fact. Yet creation is not limited to the grand scale. On a personal level, the stories we tell ourselves shape the reality we live in. Two people may face the same situation but experience it entirely differently depending on their beliefs and perspectives. One may see a challenge as an opportunity, another as a disaster. The external facts are the same, but the inner reality diverges. This shows that consciousness creates the meaning of reality, and in doing so, it shapes the path of life itself. Dreams, imagination, and altered states of awareness further reveal the flexibility of reality. Under their influence, the mind can experience environments, beings, and events as vivid as waking life. These experiences can transform beliefs, inspire creativity, and alter behavior in the waking world. Consciousness creates realities within itself that ripple outward, affecting the external world in measurable ways. In this sense, the boundary between internal creation and external observation is porous, with each influencing the other. The role of collective consciousness adds yet another layer. Shared beliefs and agreements form the foundation of societies. Entire realities, nations, economies, religions, exist only because many minds hold them in common. When collective belief shifts, so too does reality. This demonstrates that while individual consciousness shapes personal experience, the combined awareness of many can reshape the world itself. Consciousness, in this sense, is not only a private observer, but a collective creator. Still, the mystery remains. Does consciousness create the underlying universe, or only the realities we experience within it? The answer may lie beyond the limits of human understanding. Perhaps the question itself reflects a false division. Reality and consciousness may not be separate things, but aspects of a single, inseparable whole. Asking whether awareness creates or observes reality may be like asking whether a wave creates or observes the ocean. They are part of one process expressed in different forms. What we do know is this: without consciousness, there is no experience, no meaning, no story. Whether the universe exists independently or not, it is consciousness that brings it to life. Reality may exist without awareness, but without awareness, it would not matter. In this sense, consciousness is not simply an observer. It is the very ground of significance, the essence that turns existence into reality as we know it. As we come to the end of this journey, we are left with a question that may never be fully answered. Does consciousness create reality, or does it merely observe it? Along the way, we have explored science, philosophy, imagination, and culture, and we've seen that the line between observation and creation is not as clear as it seems. Consciousness shapes experience through perception, memory, belief, and meaning. It creates entire inner worlds that influence the outer one. At the same time, reality seems to possess a structure and consistency that resists our complete control, suggesting that awareness participates within a greater framework rather than inventing it from nothing. Perhaps the truest answer is that consciousness and reality are not separate. They are two sides of a single mystery. Reality provides the stage, and consciousness gives it light, sound, and meaning. Without the stage, there is no performance. Without the awareness, there is no play to witness. The two exist together, inseparable, each defining the other. This perspective invites us to rethink what it means to live. If consciousness is not just an observer, but a participant, then every moment of awareness is part of the ongoing creation of reality. The way we focus attention, the beliefs we hold, the emotions we cultivate, all ripple outward, shaping the texture of the world around us. Even if we cannot bend the laws of physics, we bend the laws of experience, and in doing so, we craft realities of joy, meaning, and wonder. It also reminds us of the mystery that surrounds us. Every breath, every thought, every dream is an expression of the unknown power that allows reality to appear in awareness. We may never fully understand whether consciousness is the source or the witness, but perhaps understanding is not the point. Perhaps the true value lies in the experience itself, the miracle of being aware at all. So tonight, as you rest, let yourself marvel at this mystery. You carry within you the light of awareness, the power that transforms the universe from silent matter into lived reality. Whether you are creating or observing, you are part of something vast, something wondrous, something beyond explanation. And with that, allow yourself to gently drift, knowing that consciousness itself is the most profound mystery of all, and it is yours.